All right, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Major Paul Cope. I am the 635th CJA, as well as an appointed ethics counselor for the Kansas National Guard. What that means for you is that I'm authorized to give you this briefing and also give you ethics opinions. So we're going to go through political activity and public demonstrations and kind of the do's and don'ts. It's going to be covered sort of in three different parts. First of all, we're going to talk about how it applies to the active duty, so that would include the AGRs and the ADOS folks in the room, how it applies to the Title 32 traditional M-Day soldiers and airmen, and then finally how it applies to the Title 32 and Title 5 technician civilian employees. I imagine we've got a mix of all those statuses in the room. I know I'm a technician, and Colonel Stinson's technician. I know we got AGRs and ADOS in here, and then traditional soldiers. So the rules are a little different as we go through this. I think the bottom line up front, though, is if you have a question about this stuff, contact your legal advisor, contact JAG. Don't mess this up, okay? It ends careers real fast, and I don't want anybody to go down that road and have that problem. So at the bottom there is our contact information, so if you need anything, get a hold of us. This is kind of our agenda. I'm going to move somewhat quickly because there's roughly 40 slides, but and again, we're going to touch on some of them. Others will spend some more time in depth, and certainly have time for discussion at the end. These are your references. Some of them might sound familiar. The Hatch Act, a lot of us have heard that term before. The DODD, which talks about how it applies to military members, and then some new guidance that's recently come out. The other part of this requirement is, if you haven't already, there is a memorandum from the Undersecretary of the Army that we're all required to read. If you haven't gotten that, get with your commander and make sure that you've had a chance to read that. All right, so basic definition, what is political activity? It seems pretty simple, right? That's any activity that's directed towards the success or failure of any political party, any partisan political group, or any candidate for political office, right? If it's somebody running for office and they declared a party after the name, Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, Green Party, whatever, if they're running under some sort of a party for an office, that makes it a partisan activity. If it supports one of those parties for some sort of office, it is a partisan political activity. Things that maybe would not be political activity, discussing legislation. If it's something that's a ballot initiative, if you're talking about, bond measures on the ballots, or sometimes some school board races where there is no partisan activity, nobody declares a party, those types of things. That would not be political activities. If you're discussing, some sort of social political issues, that's not considered political activity. However, caution, those things can very quickly turn into political discussions, right? Because a lot of those sometimes have ideological basis to them, or certain parties believe one way or another about them. So be very, very careful if you're going to have those discussions in the military workplace or in the federal workplace. Don't let it go into the political side. It might be better just to avoid it entirely. And then, of course, attending marches or rallies in support of some sort of an issue. Women's marches or March for Life or those types of things. That is not considered to be a political activity, again, with the same caveat and caution that make sure it doesn't go partisan. Make sure that you're not, engaging in the partisan portion of it. So who's covered by this DOD directive? So this is going to be our first part. This part I talked about. This is the stuff that applies to the AGRs, the active duty folks, the Title 10 active duty. So if you're on Title 10 and deployed, if you're ADOS, ADSW, any type of an active duty status. All right, so pretty simple. It does expand, coverage to include some service members not on active duty in very special cases, and sometimes retirees as well. And it does define the active duty to include the full-time National Guard duty, regardless of how long you're on those orders, regardless of the purpose. If you're on active duty, this applies to you. It's a long definition that goes a long way into saying what I just kind of talked about. So if you want to get more into it, you can read these things. Otherwise, just understand that if you're on some sort of an active duty order, it applies. All right, so the things that you can do outside of the workplace. If you're on active duty, register.
What about state active duty?
That would be covered by state active duty, good point, sir. That would be covered by any type of rules that your state would have. So most states, if you're a state employee, because on state active duty, we're employees of the state of Kansas, state of Missouri, wherever, but generally for us, it'd be the state of Kansas. That's going to be whatever the state's rules are for state employees. So you want to consult with your state human resources office on that. All right, so if you're on active duty, the things you can do and things that are encouraged, particularly the first one, register and vote as you choose. Go out there, register, go to the polls, take part in the political process, take part in the democratic process. Absolutely. write a letter to the editor expressing your personal views. Not saying, hey, I'm Major Paul Cope, CJA with the 635th RSG, and I believe this, and my unit believes this. That's going to be bad, and I'm going to get fired, right? On the other hand, though, if I write it as Mr. Paul Cope, citizen of, Topeka, Kansas, write it to the editor expressing my opinion, that's fine. Displaying political bumper stickers on a personal vehicle. However, understand that there are other rules for different things you display in your vehicle that could cross into the EO lane or the sapper lanes or things like that. So be careful that it's not otherwise offensive. Be a member of political clubs or parties when not in uniform. Be a candidate for a public office in a nonpartisan election, so like the school board, or if there's some local council or whatever that's not partisan, you can be and hold those offices. If you're on active duty, if you want to run in a partisan election, good luck. You got to get approval from the service secretary, so the Secretary of the Army, Secretary of the Air Force, whoever has to give you that approval. So if you want to write that and ask for it, have at it. If you are M-Day and M-Day only, you are permitted to be a partisan candidate. However, there are restrictions. You really, really, really need to come talk to JAG if you're thinking about doing that, okay? You can do it. We can get you there, but you're going to want to get your left and rights because it's really easy to run afoul of those. Also, on active duty, you can contribute money to political parties, campaigns, partisan groups. You can attend political rallies, but don't go in uniform. I'm sure you've all seen the video from a few years ago of the guy who rolled up on stage at the political rally for one of the presidential candidates, full ACUs, identifies himself as corporal whatever, and gets up there and gives a speech on behalf of the candidate in front of this big rally. No go. Not a good idea. Just don't do it. Not in uniform, not during the duty day. Signing, nominating petitions, those types of things you can do. And then finally, you can follow, like, and comment on media pages or social media pages for candidates for partisan office. Do that on your own time. If you're going to do it at work, that's not okay. All right? Some of the things that are prohibited. If you're on active duty, you should not engage in partisan political activity unless it was under the stuff that we previously discussed that is allowed. You should avoid any inference that appeared to show any kind of official DOD endorsement. That's why we say don't do it in uniform, because anytime we're in uniform, we go do something, the public's going to look at it and say, oh, they can look at that, the Army endorses that, the National Guard endorses that. Can't do that. And then I think the last one is kind of the catch-all. Can't wear the uniform in connection with furthering any political activities. And that's pretty clear. If it's not clear, the next slide will make it clear. No political association uniform. I know it feels like we said that 15 different ways, but somebody messes this up all the time, every day, every year, especially during campaign and election season, especially every 4 years during the major elections. It gets messed up. So just don't do it. All right, other things you cannot do, using your official authority to influence the election, so telling your subordinates how to vote, right? You're going through the office and you're like, hey, it's election day. Go vote for this candidate. And you're like, no, not okay. Don't do it. Participating in partisan political fundraising activities. So this is where things kind of break. You can go to those rallies. You can go to those conventions, those meetings. The fundraising is where it's a bridge too far. Again, speaking before a partisan political gathering. Volunteering, and then this is all active duty stuff. So volunteering for those campaigns, distributing materials, organizing party events. So again, this is the stuff that's done in furtherance of a particular candidate or political party. Finally, can't serve as a party delegate, forwarding campaign and political party emails, and in particular forwarding, again, from your .mil email, that's not going to go well. And then linking to or sharing on social media pages. It's one thing to like them or to view them or look at them. It's another thing to share them or forward them on to your contacts or whatever else. All right, so now we move into kind of the Title 32 traditional soldier, traditional airmen that are not serving on active duty. So you do have a little more leeway on this. All right, as long as you're not in uniform, you can typically take part in those activities that would generally be prohibited if you're on active duty. So if you're not in uniform and you're not saying anything or doing anything that would give that inference or that thought that you're endorsing it, that's okay. You can do those things. And as long as that activity is not done in conjunction with your military duty. So, yeah, you're not on active duty, but if you're at drill on IDT status and you go out and do this stuff, it's still not okay. Probably because you're going to be in uniform. You're probably supposed to be here with us instead of out doing that. So again, if you have questions, go talk to your legal advisor on it. So the catch-all, the thing that, we always have a catch-all in everything, right? Because, well, why not? So anything that's not expressly prohibited that might be contrary to the spirit or the intent of the regulation is also prohibited. So just because it's not expressly in there, but it's close enough, or if it would violate what they're trying to get to here, which is, look, we're trying to keep the uniform out of politics, and we're trying to avoid those unlawful or undue influences or endorsements of a candidate, a party, or whatever else by members in uniform. So if it otherwise would be contrary to the spirit, it should be avoided and not done. And some of those things that apply 24/7, doesn't matter what your status is, full-time or otherwise. Again, like I said, influencing or trying to affect that outcome involving your subordinates, which is generally just a bad idea anyway. Anything involving your official title or position. I know we always talk, certainly if you can use your rank, I'd probably just stay away from it, but anything that uses your title or position, so if I say I'm Colonel Stinson, Brigade Commander of the 635th, and you should vote for this person, that's bad. He could probably get away with saying I'm Colonel Stinson, but I would just avoid it. However, again, if you have questions, come talk to us, we'll get you in the right way. Using your agency resources, like an official agency media account to say something one way or another about a candidate, that's happened a few times. Usually makes everybody laugh a little bit because you're like, oh, somebody just lost their job, right? Because they used the Department of the Army's Twitter account and they sent something out saying something about a candidate or something else. Funny, probably except for that guy or gal that just got fired. And just gives a really bad look to everything going on. And then using non-public agency information for political purposes. I've tried to think of an example of what something like that might be. I can't really come up with one, but it's probably one of those you know it when you see it. So again, if you have those questions, come talk to us. So our third category is the civilian employees. So I'm talking here are Title 32 technicians, Title 5 civilian employees, or any other civilian employees of the Department of Defense. There's two categories here. You got the less restricted and the further restricted. Kind of break that down a little further. Basically, anybody that's a National Guard employee, Title 5 or Title 32 technician is going to be in the less restricted category. If you have questions about what category you're in, come talk to me. We'll see if you fit into one of them, but I'm going to take a wild guess. If you're a technician or Title 5, you're in the less restricted employee category. So a lot of the stuff's the same. The rules are very similar to what it is for active duty military members. Again, using your official authority to influence, affect the outcome. You can't do it. Fundraising, soliciting, accepting, receiving contributions, running for partisan office, soliciting or discouraging a political activity of a person with business before their office. There's a story of somebody just recently came out. Somebody at a post office, an employee there said, "Yeah, no, I can't sell you stamps if you're going to use." There was somebody who was mailing in their mail-in ballot, and they said, "Oh, how much is a stamp to mail this in?" They said, "Oh, well, if you vote for this person, it's whatever a stamp costs. If you vote for this person, it's $5." Seems like a silly, small joke. I believe that employee got suspended for a number of days without pay from their civilian job. So, again, they take this pretty seriously, the federal government, and they should. All right, no fundraising. That's in there in big bold for a reason, because that's an issue. So just don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. And when it talks about the use of any of that, if you're going to be doing any of these things, the use of government equipment to do this is also not good. So if you're at work on your government computer, you got your government cell phone, and you've got your social media account pulled up and you're liking those pages, first of all, you shouldn't be doing it during work. You shouldn't be using your government equipment to do any of that kind of stuff. All right, so there is some difference between being outside the workplace versus in the workplace on duty. This applies to the civilian employees. So again, you can register and vote. If you're at your house, you can put campaign signs up in your front yard. That's okay. Bumper stickers on your car. Be members of political clubs. Be candidates for public office and nonpartisan. Sounds very familiar to your active duty rules, right? Same thing again. You can campaign for those referendum questions, the bond issues, the whatever else, the constitutional amendments, ordinances. You can contribute your own money on your own time to political organizations. Follow, like, and comment on those social media pages. All the same rules there. When you're not on duty in the workplace and not using government equipment, you can also work as campaign volunteers. And this is where things kind of go a little different from being on active duty. So if you're not on duty, you're on your own time, you're off work, whatever else, you can attend those rallies and be active. You can speak on behalf of the candidate. You can hold an office with your party. So So that's where some of those differences go between the active duty, where all those things are pretty much a no-go, to the civilian employees, the less restricted civilian employees that are not at work, not on duty time, not using government equipment. You can do these things. And that slide was just the further restricted, since nobody in here, I believe, falls into that. We won't cover that to save some time here. So on duty and in the workplace prohibitions. On duty time includes teleworking. Okay? So just because you're not in the workplace, but you're teleworking, which I know an awful lot of people have been, or maybe again, the same rules still apply. If you're in a government room, even if you're in a break room, conference room, at the gym, whatever else, if it's a government building, government-owned thing, the rules still apply. If you're wearing an official uniform or insignia, so if I'm a Title V employee, but I'm wearing my Kansas National Guard polo shirt, that would be an insignia of our organization, and therefore anything I'm doing, it could be implied that I'm endorsing or using my official position there. While using a government vehicle, and again, the government equipment or devices. So some of those examples about being in the workplace, if you're in the workplace, and these would apply even if you're active duty or M-Day, is, I can't put a campaign button on my uniform and wear it around. First of all, it's probably not in compliance with 670-1, and also it violates this as well. Screensavers, posters in your office, political posters that have one candidate or whatever else, making online donations while you're at work, emailing, texting, using social media to further any of these campaigns. Again, most of this is pretty common sense stuff, right? When you're at work, we want you doing work and not doing this stuff. You can do that at home. But again, okay to display those bumper stickers on your personal vehicle, but like I warned at the beginning, make sure it's not something that's going to be otherwise offensive or trigger some other rule. All right, so some examples of those permitted or prohibited logos. And we went ahead and made it easy and answered it for everybody. So can you display these? Again, these are all supporting a particular candidate or are in opposition to a particular candidate the same way. So those would all be a no. These kind of things that are more speaking towards a cause or an issue, again, as long as it doesn't become political, and that's where the line gets really, really thin on some of this stuff, because a lot of these, a lot of times, generate political discussion. These would generally be permitted, but be careful, be cautious. And then finally, the things that would be an absolute no-go, again, those kind of things are not going to be allowed, because they are either speaking against an opposition or, in furtherance of some party, candidate, whatever else. These kind of things, and on the shirt there, that's the black shirt, on the sleeve it's hard to see, but it's got a Bernie Sanders logo, so that would be supporting a particular candidate. The shirt in the middle, I think, has a logo on the sleeve. You can't see, same thing. The Trump, Pence, any function, because again, it's speaking either against or for a particular candidate. So social media guidance, and this applies 24/7. All statuses. Remember, if it's anything that deals with political contributions or fundraising, you can't share that, push that out, whatever else. If it's just liking the candidate or the party, that's okay, but the fundraising is where the line is drawn. Again, while on duty in the workplace, just avoid it. Stay off of it. Using it in your using the account in your official capacity to engage in the political activity. So again, if you hijack the unit's Facebook page and do that, that's not okay. And then, like it says, including your official title or position on your social media page is okay, but understand that once you do that, everything you put on that page is then potentially an official endorsement or could be a violation of this. This does happen where, and it happened a few years ago. I've dealt with it where soldier put something up on their personal Facebook page, political post. It was in their off-duty time, their M-Day, whatever else, okay? They came to drill, though, the same post was still up. So once they came back into that status where they're in uniform, the post didn't go away just because their status changed. It was still there, and so that was prohibited political activity at that point. So just something to be aware of. You got to be careful with that kind of stuff. These are just some additional examples of that impermissible fundraising. Again, sharing or liking them, because basically what it does is once you do that, it puts it on your feed and starts distributing out there, and basically it's advertising for that fundraising stuff, and that's why. Same thing with using Twitter or any of the other types of social media platforms. Even if you use your personal device, even if you're sharing content that you didn't write but somebody else did, even if you're just sharing it with your friends or other like-minded coworkers, if you do it while on duty, it's prohibited. Again, same rules apply with teleworking. Some things that are special considerations: know what's in your background if you're on like a Zoom meeting or something, or one of those things, because if you got the big political poster behind you in the background, that's not going to be okay. We've all seen the funny videos out there of Zoom meetings gone horribly wrong or whatever else. Those are good. You don't want to be featured in one of these trainings, though, because of something that went wrong. I don't want to see, like, Major Custer or somebody else up there. Yeah, I'm picking on you, because they put something in their background. So again, be cautious what's behind you. Be cautious what's on video. All right, so public demonstrations. This one is obviously kind of come up a little bit recently with protest activities that are going on. Generally, members are prohibited from participating in off-post demonstrations if they're on duty, if they're in a foreign country, because special rules apply in foreign countries for that. If the activities constitute a breach of law and order, if violence is likely to result, and if they're wearing the uniform in violation of whatever the regulations are. So you have the right to do those things, but make sure you're following the rules and you know what's going on. Again, if you have questions on that in particular, come see us. We want to make sure, again, nobody gets in trouble for trying to exercise their constitutional rights. When you're doing or participating in public demonstrations, and this applies to our DoD civilians in particular, that those participation is generally not considered a political activity unless it's organized or in support of a partisan political group or party or campaign, candidate, whatever else. So generally, it would not be considered political activity, but if it takes that step over, or if it's organized by a candidate, then it would be. However, again, the caveat, remember, if it would give the impression that it looks like it's an endorsement, then you shouldn't be doing it. Off-duty hours, or be in a leave status, one or the other. And then, again, if you're publicly expressing your personal view, whether it's in writing, speech, or whatever else, make it very clear that you don't represent the official position of the DoD. A lot of times you see that disclaimer when people put their personal blog posts up. It's like, hey, this is my views do not represent that of the DoD, the Department of the Army, Kansas National Guard, whatever else. So make sure you do that, because that also makes it, makes it clear that you're not endorsing it. All right, so if you're a civilian and do these things, these are the penalties that apply. They're pretty harsh. And the Merit Systems Protection Board usually will uphold those types of things. You can't read that because it's super tiny, but that is that's the memorandum that everybody will need to read and acknowledge that they've read. All right, so some of the common frequently asked questions. Again, M-Day only, like we talked. You can do a lot of those things that are normally prohibited when on active duty, as long as you're not in conjunction duty, not in uniform. So, again, this just clarifies that a little more, but I think everybody's pretty much got the point on that. All right, does the Hatch Act apply to Title 32 dual status technicians? Anybody? Yes, right? Okay. Got it. Even while you're on military leave, so it would still apply, as well as the DoD restrictions. If you work in state government, can you engage in communication with the presidential campaign? Again, seek guidance from your specific state agency. I mean, you can certainly talk to us, but we're going to say, yeah, you probably should see your human resources representative. Or, like was asked, if you're on state active duty, then come talk to us. We can get you those rules about what that's required. But yeah, if you work for, I don't know, the Department of Transportation or something, go ask them what the rules are. Make sure that you're good with their HR department. All right, and then are all Title V personnel in the states less restricted? According to NGB, the answer is yes. They're all less restricted personnel. They're not aware of anybody in the states who would that apply to. You end up at NGB in certain level positions, it's possible maybe, but within the states, everybody's less restricted. And then the things that apply to everybody, no matter if they're full-time or part-time, I think we kind of covered that stuff, is that guidance applies, but just know which things are for your status. And if you have questions about that, or questions you forget about it, come let us know. All right, so that concludes this